Good morning, everybody. I hope you all slept well.
That was a good party.
Boy, we had a heck of a good party last night. Anyway, I'd like to introduce you to Joe Fex. Joe came and spoke for us last year, and I want you to know he has got to be one of the most knowledgeable young men I've ever met. How old are you?
36. That was a long time ago.
He's one of the most knowledgeable young men I've ever known. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Joe. I just can't say enough about him.
All right. Are you through now? I hope all of you had a chance to come down here this morning and take a look at some of the things laying around here. Some of them will be described, some of them are just for primary display. But one of the things we're here to talk about today is continuance in phenomena, continuance in archival record and in research, connections between different phenomena, and primarily more focused towards Sasquatch phenomena and enigma. A lot of people aren't aware at the moment, but there are several projects that are ongoing in at least 4 different states in this country in which direct communication with Sasquatch peoples, and that's how they should be referred to, are being engaged in. And these are creating... Thank you. Can everybody hear okay? Great. They are creating situations between humans and Bigfoot that until previously in the past 6 or 7 years had never come to light before. A lot of these situations we're finding have been ongoing for a great deal of time, from individual families in rural areas to entire communities. And it seems that the more people interact with them, the less concerned they are with telling the rest of the world about it. Most people that have these intimate relationships are extremely personal about them, and they're very protective of their friends. In Tennessee, there is a woman, Janice Carter Coy, who has been in the presence of a great number of these beings, ranging, it has to be at least 20 or 30 different personalities that she has physically encountered over the years, but she has been exposed to them since about the age of 6. And it started with a relationship developed by her grandfather. And he was so secretive about it, his 2 granddaughters were the only people he ever told about it in his entire life. And he was also very knowledgeable and very close to a lot of Native Americans, which may have a lot to do with some of the attitudes that Mr. Carter had. One of the problems in research today is far too often researchers, scientists, enthusiasts alike tend to take known knowledge and apply it to everything that's brought to them. For instance, if somebody reports something to an individual investigator or researcher and it doesn't coincide with any of his data, they have a tendency to reject it entirely without any investigation or examination in any level. The UFO community has been doing this for years. The Bigfoot community has been doing this for years. And it seems that scientifically, those that take these matters seriously can often blindside themselves with what they know and lose perspective on what they don't know. And just as with most scientific discovery, we often find that once we achieve new knowledge, new understanding about any particular scientific endeavor, that we're generally wrong in our assessments of it to begin with. That isn't always, but it's often the fact. And we have to reorganize the way we think about things. So whether you're a serious researcher or just an interested individual, you have to bear that in mind when you go over any of this type of information, whether it's paperback books, documentaries, right down to files and reports. One of the perspectives of the public is that the public has a tendency to digest materials that's given to them through these types of media and see it as authority. When the true fact of the matter is nobody really knows the meaning behind any of this. All we know is that it's there, it's always been there, And we have a problem dealing with it psychologically and socially. We have a lot of, you know, I'm sure everybody's aware that the vast amount of social fears that have developed, not only in this country but worldwide. We have a hard time interacting with each other, much less something that's from somewhere completely unknown. And more and more we're discovering as we slowly advance forward, we discover that a lot of these things are on an understandable level. But most of that understanding is going to have to come from your own personal perspective and your own ability to examine things clear-mindedly, without your opinions, without your emotions, without what you've been told about things. It's amazing how many people I've met over the years that literally their belief in most things is solely dictated to them. A person does or doesn't believe in UFOs because they've been told they're not there, you know, and so on and so forth. And this has caused a great barrier in social interrelations, to where when a person has an experience, they don't want to talk about it. But I think we're reaching a point in research and reaching a point in getting this entire situation with phenomena more and more socialized and integrated into the public mind, that most people are capable of adjusting to it. Most people are capable of realizing, rationalizing, and seeing why these things are definitely there. The question shouldn't be, do you believe UFOs exist? You know, do you believe Bigfoot exists? The only question is, have you realized their existence? We have records of these things going back to the oldest writings of mankind. It seems the only phenomena that's occurring here is with us, not with the activity that we're observing or trying to understand. Once again, we have such a deep response to this sub-psychologically that we've pretty much existed in denial from the beginning. From the point where humans learned how to write and draw on cave walls, we've known about these things, but we've rejected them socially. We don't discuss them. We didn't discuss them then. We don't discuss them now. The only difference is back then, you know, when you saw strange things, people tended to burn you over it, you know, and something like that could get you stoned. 200 years ago to 120 years ago, there was a vast problem with insane asylums, which are still in a very mundane state. But it was really hideous in the past few hundred years. And if a person saw something completely unknown and completely unobserved by their peers, this was enough to have you incarcerated for the rest of your life. And back in those days, asylums didn't treat people. They kept them. So it was more or less like a lockdown prison. And a lot of people ended up being the butt of someone else's scientific exploration in these institutions. So there's a great inherent fear in society from the past 100 years, a period that's not really that far away from us now, in which people could be incarcerated simply for having an extraordinary experience and trying to voice that out, hoping that somebody will help them understand it, you know? This right here is the best thing that society can be doing. It's the healthiest thing. And anybody that studied sociology or psychology can clearly see this. The best thing to do is for like-minded people with like-minded experiences to get together and talk about it. And that gets us more in a mind frame to where we feel comfortable talking about it. And then we feel comfortable talking about it with several people around. And next thing you know, we're going to be feeling comfortable talking about it anywhere we are, to anybody, without so much of an inherent worry or concern over what a person thinks of you. There are enough people in this world, in this country, in this state, that have encountered things beyond human understanding. And these things are evident by materials collected, you know, a mountain of witness testimony, but it does have scientific foundation. We find it in archival records. We find it in archaic records. We find it in samples that are found. And a lot of people say, you know, well, if Bigfoot exists, how come we don't have one? You know, it's rather a ridiculous notion because it's not as cut and dry as that. You're talking about an extremely large being that's more likened to a Kodiak bear. This is not the kind of thing you shoot, and if you shot one, you probably wouldn't walk out of there alive. You know, it's the quickest way to get one to hostilely attack you. It's real clear that beings such as this, unlike the UFO phenomenon, 98% of the time, Sasquatch aren't violent. They act it. But all of us primates do that, from gorillas down to humans. We like to puff ourselves up, you know what I mean, and put on an attitude and, you know, shield ourselves. And they use intimidation to keep themselves private, you know, and to keep people away from them. Most of them move around a lot, but some of them live in a singular area and spend their whole lives there. It's very rare, but it does occur. This is where a lot of contact is coming from. But what we're discovering about these contacts are elements of paranormal psychology and paranormal science that up until now have been almost universally ignored by science, by enthusiasts, by the public. The public doesn't even know about it because 99.9% of the time, anytime an author, researcher, or scientist writes about these things, collects the data, and sees over and over and over again, not on a daily basis, but enough to have to pay attention to. There's a Bigfoot sighting here, there's a UFO sighting here, two totally separate incidences in one location. There's a Bigfoot here, there's a Phantom Panther reported here, you know, within miles, sometimes in the same place at the same time. Too fantastic for most people to believe. But we have enough data now. 30, 40 years ago, UFO studies were still in their infancy. This kind of material, you didn't even look at. It was a waste of time. It was obviously insanity or lies, one of the two. And so most of the people that wrote most of the data and published it for the public to see didn't feel that the public was intelligent enough to make their own assessment of the collected data that they had collected, and they would remove this information. And they still do it now. They still do it now, especially in the Bigfoot community. They're notorious for it. Nobody wants to talk about this, but everybody has this material, you know. The public has rarely seen any of it, hardly any of this type of material, habituation, psychic contact, telepathy, Phantom Panther connections, UFO connections, vortexes or other dimensions, you know, which is purely theoretical. But these things are violently aggressed by the main body of Bigfoot research. Everybody wants to grab onto what we're familiar with, first and foremost. And we went through the same evolution with UFOs. It's just with Bigfoot research, it's been slower because we have animals and biology to compare them to. When we first started collecting UFO data, we didn't have nothing to compare this to. We didn't have a clue what these things were, where they could possibly be from, or anything. Most people thought they were a natural phenomenon of some kind when it first became a widespread occurrence in this country. But one has to question exactly how long was it widespread in this country before it even got an identity. The further we go back in time, the more we find this type of data. If you attend the November conference, in November 7th in Denver, I'll be conducting a workshop on how do you find these things. Items like this article here was sent to me by another Bigfoot researcher who engages in similar activities. This was from William Drenganis, and this is just a straight Xerox copy of an original newspaper. And it is 1934, July 29th, 1934. And it's quite clear what they're talking about here. Bigfoot wasn't discovered in the United States until '58, by the way. So what's this doing here? They don't exist. Why is it there? You know, I have several items like this and artifacts like this. This is from 1883. Describes a Bigfoot encounter with two hunters that is no different than a report that I could have taken last week. The patterns are the same throughout, whether you're talking about the 1800s, the 1400s, or 6000 BC. The records are the same, the patterns are the same, the reports are the same. We have to contend with the fact that these things are here, whether we have one in a lab or not. And a lab is certainly where they wouldn't belong. What we're learning in Tennessee, in Texas, and a couple of other places, thank you, is that these beings are not only more disciplined than we are spiritually and socially, although you wouldn't be able to tell to look at them, they kind of smell bad and all this kind of stuff, but they're extremely profoundly intelligent. They understand, they theorize, they study. They've been studying us for hundreds of years. Most people don't realize that, but the research that we have collected indicates this directly. They know more about us than we know about them. So of course we don't have one in the lab. Try catching one. Most people can't catch a running house cat, much less, you know, anywhere from 700 to 1,400 pound bipedal being that is tremendously powerful. They're solid as rocks. We know this for a fact. We have people on site that can touch them. They still won't allow us to photograph them up close, but they'll let us do it at a distance, and they'll let us use long-range materials to do it. A lot of this material isn't going to be surfacing in depth in the general public for several years, and there's good reason for it. It's not being withheld because of any secret discoveries or any secrecy. We make public primarily what we can that doesn't endanger them. In other words, we have over somewhere around 1,200 to 1,400 collected words, phrases, and definitions of their language. It would be next to impossible for a human to imitate this in a manner that would fool a Sasquatch. But we still have to be concerned with the language. What was the first thing we did with Indians? We lied to them. Just like Indians, they don't understand that concept. If they don't want to tell you something, they dodge around it, just like your next door neighbor would, or your kid. You know, they don't want to talk about it, so they try to change the subject, or they'll just flat out tell you, this information is not for you. It's they know certain information about themselves that can make them very vulnerable. You know, so it'll be several years before we even get this kind of information from them. We've already gotten a lot of information from them that could be detrimental to their welfare. So we have to keep this information from the public, because there's still a wide range of fools out there that A, think they can take one down with a rifle. It can happen, but I wouldn't bet on it. B, think they'll get $1 million if they bring in a dead body. That's not true. You know, anybody that's turned in any vastly important artifact of any kind can see that you're nobody. When you look at Sue, the dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus, you people familiar with that one? It was found in South Dakota several years ago. It was found by the natives up there. It was found on their land. It was theirs. FBI comes in, takes the skeleton, sells it to the museums in Chicago. I was in Chicago when it arrived. And it goes to show, you know, if you discovered Bigfoot today and brought that to the public, guess what? That would last about 2 days, because then science would move in. Grover Krantz is right. Scientists would move in. The pros would come in. I'm not a scientist. I just read too much. I enjoy going over data, and there's a lot of things about the physical reality and my scope of reality that I have a problem with. I have a problem with what I've been told about it not coinciding with my own experience in it. You on? Where was I?
Pretty much where you are right now.
Anyway, I'll get to that a little later on. But anyway, so what we're observing here is we're observing an extremely acute intelligence. It's similar to ours, but not the same. Here in human society, most people consider that we're the superior beast. We're obviously still beasts. We're still bombing each other and such. That we have all of these placements beyond the animal kingdom. Just a short period ago, 75 years ago, it was an idiotic idea that an animal like a sheep or a cat or a dog or even a goldfish had thought, had emotion, had attachments and bonds, especially with humans. Anybody that's owned an animal knows this is absolutely ridiculous, but people believed it for the longest time. You know, it wasn't until the 30s when people like Vincent Price and a few other nationally known figures started stepping forward and talking out and saying, you know, these are more than just dumb animals, and they're not here for our disposal. The Bigfoot know our attitudes towards animals. This is another factor. Would you want to integrate with us? You know, it's clear that they have a way of knowing. I'm not going to get too much into this, but this is one thing that's a burr in every Bigfoot researcher's saddle is no one wants to hear this. They are indeed telepathic. They're exhibiting several different forms of kinetic and psychic interaction that is acutely developed, that they initiate. You know, we didn't ask them for any of this. This is something that they pulse out, something that they have pushed forward and given to us. And unfortunately, this has been reported since, I think, 1964. And no one listened to it. You know, in '63 is the oldest report that I have in which a Bigfoot spoke a word, whether it was English or something else. It spoke a distinctive dialect. And in early 1970s, around 73, 74, a man named Alan Berry and Ron Moorhead got clear, distinctive, extensive recordings from a distance of about 12 to 20 feet away from the beings. Their microphones were right on top of them. So they got good recordings. The entire Bigfoot community has ignored these recordings ever since, even though they have stood to every technique in scientific examination, and there is no other answer outside of the fact that what is on these tapes is a Sasquatch, a whole group of them. The thing that freaked a lot of people out at the time was a bulk of the tapes is in an animalistic type of communication, something you might expect from a gorilla. Not that they should be compared to gorillas. A lot of animals look like a lot of things, but it doesn't mean they're actually related or part of those family lineages. And that seems to be the case with Sasquatch. They don't like the gorilla comparison. That bothers them. They don't think of us as gorillas. They think of us as, what does Fox say? He has a term for humans in general. Misguided brothers. Yeah. See, it's still in its infancy right now. But one of the things that we have to address with this is how they got this way, of course. Pulled up by archaeologists, then, well, where the hell is it? You know, I want to see it. And invariably, they all disappear. You know, there was a lot of information that would lead me to believe that the Smithsonian Institution has a great deal to do with the dissemination of data for the public. And that is very apparent in the same chain of study and activity that we get UFO and Bigfoot confirmation with. A lot of people ask, why would, most Bigfoot researchers, by the way, aren't into the whole conspiracy bag. They're not into that thing at all. They're not familiar with it. To most of them, it's kind of a crackpot thing to even bring up. But just because it sounds crazy doesn't make it crazy. And some of the craziest things I've ever heard actually have a very great deal of foundation behind them. Another one of the problems with getting a lot of this out to the public, making humans aware, is that these things are far more complex than what most people imagine. They think, you know, you get a Bigfoot living or dead and bring it out and show it to people. Well, for one, nobody tells them what to do. Even Janice, that has grown up around them and is considered one of them by them, she is one of their brethren, you know. She doesn't tell them what to do in any case. We can only advise. They're bigger than us. And they're not the type of thing you want to upset, because often in their psychology, when they get upset, they act like human adolescents, you know? And you get the distinct impression that they're not aware of their own strength sometimes. And they can do a lot of damage to property and such, livestock. That isn't a general activity, but it's one that can occur, and when it does occur, most general conflicts are a direct result of human ignorance, such as shooting one, or even pointing a gun at one. They understand what these things are. They understand why we want them. They understand why we want to know about them. But they also understand what we did to the Indians, and they don't want no part of it until now, until the past at least 75 years. I've examined far too much evidence that would indicate that they have intentionally exposed themselves to us for quite a period of time, possibly hundreds of years, in small quantities. It's very clear that, A, if a Bigfoot wanted to kill a human being, the Sasquatch would have him. You can't outpace him, you can't outpower him. And, you know, unless you hit a vital organ very quickly, A single bullet or maybe even 2 bullets wouldn't be enough to save your life, you know? But they don't. That tells us a lot about their perspective about us. They're more patient with us than we are with them. I haven't seen a Bigfoot shooting at anybody recently. But another one of the problems, socialistically speaking, is, once again, as I mentioned before, that we have difficulty getting along with the different cultures that we have, and even just the different ideas. You see a lot of this at UFO conferences and such. People have differing ideas, but a good researcher, a good scholar or scientist knows that all of your ideas about something, you have to have the ability to remove during your studies. You can't take what you know and dissect what you don't know with that material. You're venturing into new ground, and new ground demands that all these preconceived conceptions and notions and what you currently know about it. What did Ivan Sanderson say? Your beliefs are like evolution. It's intelligent, and it's intelligence and evolution moving that changes our belief structures, changes our perceptions of our surroundings, of ourselves, and all of these things. Right now, humans are in a very poor psychology state with the things that we're concerned with. We preoccupy ourselves with too much idiocy, you know, and we're not aware of the things that go around in our own environment. Paranormal, governmental, conspiracy, whatever, you know. We're not paying attention. It's incredible to me that Janice Coy released this material many, many years ago, and still, most people don't even know that this is even happening, much less ongoing, much less that it's even been studied, much less that we have DNA, you know? And that's why I say it's not a matter of do you believe in them, you know? Tell them. It doesn't matter whether you believe in a UFO or not, it's there. And they apparently don't care about your belief. Ivan Sanderson once said the universe doesn't give a damn about our beliefs, and we have to contend with the facts whether we like them or not, no matter how uncomfortable they make us. And we're uncomfortable with things that we don't understand. We're still in a state of psychological, emotional fear. And it causes us to repel from things instead of take the perspective to confront them, explore them, you know? And as with all exploration, it's often dangerous, you know? A lot of people have died in UFO research, in UFO studies, and in Bigfoot studies. A lot of people have lost their credibility, their careers, everything, their families, simply for doing what they believed was right. People should know about this. It doesn't matter what the government says. People should know about it. They're mutilating animals. They're mutilating domestic animals. They're mutilating people. People should know about this. Fox News reported about 6-7 months ago, over 13,000 people disappeared from the state of Colorado with foul play ruled out. These aren't runaways. These aren't abduction victims. They're not people that wander off and commit suicide, but 13,000 people is too much for me to not look at. I feel responsible. This is my world too. If people are getting snatched off my world, I want to know about it. I might not be able to do anything about it, but at least I'll know about it, you know? These are things the public should be aware of, and they shouldn't be just briefly mentioned on the news. Oh, by the way, 13,000 people disappeared last year from the state of Colorado. We have no idea what happened to them. Not a trace. Is it just me, or is that insane? What's more insane? The fact that it's real, the fact that it's happened, or the fact that the news would make a statement like that and not even follow up on it? Wouldn't elaborate it on in the least. Wouldn't go any further than that. You know? What's more insane? That or a public that sits there and learns it does nothing. You know? It's, especially here in America, we have a terrible habit of not giving a damn about anything until it happens to us or someone we know. You know? David Byrne from the Talking Heads has a wonderful quote that I think is one of my prime personal philosophies. You know? And he says that caring for others is our job. Loving it is yours. You know? And it's been my personal experience, wandering through this existence, that if you don't have concern for others, you can't have concern for yourself. You know? And this goes along for people you do know and people you don't know. But we're pretty poor at how we treat one another, socially, academically, real bad academically. It's amazing that some of the most brilliant minds in science are also some of the most childish people I've ever studied under, you know, and ever examined their work. This is one of the big plagues of the Bigfoot community is right now there's only 3 living members of the original pioneers, the people that brought Bigfoot information to the public and went out looking for them. None of which, by the way, have ever seen a Bigfoot. 50 years of following these things, and none of them have even seen it. It's time to change how we think about it. If this were simply an animal, we'd have better success than that. They'd at least see the damn thing. But it's terrible to watch a man put his whole life towards something and never even get that much, never even get that close, you know, and never have that privilege. Unfortunately, the members that are still alive today are still seated in their ways. They still view things the way that they always have. And you couldn't force these guys to go out to any of these locations and encounter them. And even if you did, their attitudes are so bad about it that the Bigfoot would not come out. Your attitude is important. If you have any familiarity with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, you'll see that there is grounds to believe that your personal, psychological, emotional structure has everything to do with how you experience an encounter of most phenomenon, you know? And it seems to coincide with the data. If you have a terrible, terrible concept of UFOs and you happen to be abducted, you will probably have a terrible, terrible experience in your abduction. But if you see it as an opportunity and are willing to take the risk, picture yourself an astronaut, man. We're going into places right now, scientifically. UFO discoveries are being made, Sasquatch discoveries are being made. These things are advancing more now than they ever have in history. And that's an important perspective to keep an eye on, because a lot of people think that there's been very little change in the advancement of proving UFOs exist. We've got the proof, we've shown the proof, the same thing with all phenomenon. We're dealing with a scientific community that will not accept it, regardless of proof. And you can throw them a dead body, you can throw them a crashed craft, they're just going to stash it away somewhere and deny that you ever gave it to them, and deny these things are there, you know. A lot of it's still a mystery on why a government or why anybody would try to keep these types of discoveries away from people, away from the general populace. And there's, you know, that's more or less for the conspiracy theorists to mull about, you know, what the motives for this might be. You know, why is this going on? These are hard enough to understand. Why would a government or why would anybody make it more difficult? You know, but there's researchers out there that do the same thing, that are out there to destroy research. And these are things we have to be careful of. You know, it's almost like a spy versus spy once you get into it to a certain extent. You know, and I was telling a friend of mine the other night that not a major function goes by that I don't go to where I walk in and somebody I've never seen before hands me material and walks away and I never hear from them again. Some of this material is quite eye-opening. You know, it's pretty profound what some people have in their possession, and a lot of people don't even know it. It's very possible you could attend a garage sale in Roswell and find a fragment of the craft sitting in somebody's barn. And they just have no idea what it is to them. It's like some old tool or something, you know, or just a chunk of something, you know. And how many people would walk through this barn before they realized, what the hell is that? You know, how much do you want for it? It's absolutely mind-boggling the extent that people have gone throughout the centuries into the modern age in personal, singular aspects and in crowds, that they've gone to deny these things are there, and most of it's simply out of fear and insecurity. I have every reason to believe that, you know, 99% of the Bigfoot population would not harm me unless I provoked it. And I stake that belief in making these pursuits completely unarmed. Because guess what? If you have a weapon, they know how we are when we're scared. they're not going to get close to you. You know, and if they do, it's going to be in a negative aspect, in a confrontation. They're going to be they'll be offended by a gun and try to drive you out of an area, which they're pretty good at. Works with most people. But most of it, like with gorillas and humans, is a show. It's a show of aggression that they don't really intend to follow up on. And if you study anything in gorilla life and gorilla behavior, like silverback gorillas, very massive animals, extremely powerful, and they could pound you flat in a heartbeat. And they'll charge you and give you every visual and audio intent that this thing is going to kill you. If you don't run, they'll stop. They don't know what to do. Most people run. They don't know what to do when somebody stops. You know, so you're at kind of a stalemate there. Most Bigfoot have that kind of an attitude. They really don't have any harmful intent whatsoever. They're aware of what we're doing. They're aware of who we are. They're aware there's good people. Most of them are aware there's bad people. You know, but they also have inherent attributes to their personalities and psychologies just like we do. Some of them are extremely prejudiced to humans. Some of them don't think we're worth a damn. But I know people like that too. You know, I know people that don't think humans are worth a damn either, and I know humans that aren't. But hopefully through communications with groups, especially leaders of these groups who are considered valuable to their peers, they're like the Indians, the elders, and you know, they have a patriarchal type of system. It's going to be vital to obtain information, not in a negative manner, but obtain information about the Sasquatch that we don't know about, the Sasquatch that we don't have any communication with. This one right here, Sarasota County, Florida. That's a skunk ape, and that's a real photo. Warren Coleman sent me this photo just about as soon as after he got it. He sent it to about 20 different people for pre-analysis. It's a real photo, and it doesn't matter what argument. I've had people struggle so hard and seen people struggle so hard to deny this photograph that they would describe as what they're seeing as a black guy with an earring or a barking dog. And these are people that believe in Bigfoot. No, we're not in too much denial here. Everybody says, where's the clear photograph? Billy Meyer comes up with them, and everybody says they're all fake because they're too damn clear. This can't be real because it's clear. It was taken from 10 feet away. But it has every earmark of being a real being. This one in particular, this type of Sasquatch, if there was a connection to the fossil hominid Gigantopithecus, this would be the living member. And we know this because of his orangutan structure. Extremely similar to orangutans, and that's where orangutans started, was with Gigantopithecus. That's the great-great-granddaddy of all orangutans. Yeah, the woman that photographed this, apparently her and her husband had some vegetables stolen from their garden, from their porch. They usually left it on their porch for their kids. And when this continued, they started to get upset, and they came up with a plan. Why don't we stay up late at night, and we'll catch the offending critter, and we'll photograph them, and we'll send it to animal control, and they'll come and relocate it. They thought they were sneaking up on a raccoon. Imagine their surprise, just like his surprise. He's very surprised. He looks like he's been caught with his pants down. It took about 10 seconds for them to take a second photo, in which several seconds were spent with the two of them just looking at each other like, now what do we do? And then it steps backwards, and it utters a sound that most primatologists would identify as a pant hoot, which is distinctive primate communication. This leaf that he bears on his lip isn't to be stylish. This means I'm afraid, this means I'm intimidated, and this means an unknown is approaching. And what this means to me, this means that while they were paying attention to him, there was another one in a very close area because he was giving warning signals. And why would you give a warning signal if there was no one to warn? But he did the lip with the leaf, and he uttered the pant hoot. Chances are there was another one right there and they didn't see it. You know? And he was down on his at least one knee, most likely. More than likely digging for roots at the base of the palmetto. and things of this. And they walked up and they got extremely close before he noticed them. And this photo was snapped right when he started standing up. And in a crouched position, he's about 7 feet tall. Like this. So when he stood up, he was about 11 feet tall. And this is what the witness says. He was about 7 feet tall when he was crouched down. We took the first photo. Well, you can take, there is a band of distinctive light across here. You can see it here. You can see it in his hair. And you can see it right there most in the closest object. And what this tells me is the average grandmother. Stand up for a minute. Yeah, stand up. Come over here and stand up.
Yes.
The average person, I'm 5'11". How tall are you? You're 5'4"? The average person is around 5 to 5'5" as far as, you know, elderly women. You know, you're talking about a woman that's probably around 50 or 60. If he's 7 feet,
Kill the camera, okay?
if you can break this down from the top of his head to the bottom of the photograph, you can establish a baseline where the ground most likely is on a loose estimated measurement, right? You can also estimate that if a woman is approximately 5 to 5.5 feet tall, she would hold a camera just like that. And when that camera went off, if you look into your flash, you will see that there is a tube in there that produces the light. That flash is causing that concentrated band of light. That concentrated band of light, if he's 7 feet tall, tells me she's about 5 and 5.5 feet from where the band of light is. Tells me that, you know, this woman's estimate of its size was pretty much on the money. You know? And this is not something that anybody that would fake a photo would even be thinking of. You know, well, where's the highest concentration of light in the photo? You know? This is something that only researchers, unfortunately, the people that took this photo anonymously, they took 2 photos, anonymously sent it to the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department making complaints about the orangutan that was loose in their yard. They had no knowledge of orangutans, and they had no idea that orangutans don't get to 7 to 11 feet tall. They don't walk on 2 feet, and they're not that ugly. You know, that's absolutely massive. It's kind of cute in a lot of ways because, like I said, he has this complete look of surprise. This is the first clear, up-close photograph that I am aware of a Sasquatch. Sure. No, stand right there. But, yeah, Lauren went down there, and to this day, I don't believe that he has located the witness. She sent this letter to the police department or the sheriff's department, whatever, completely cussing him out. And so they didn't sign it. And it just happened that animal control officer overheard 2 patrol officers mentioning a loose orangutan that had been reported by several people in the county. And he asked them, well, animal control, it's his job. What are you talking about, an orangutan? And they said, we got photos in the file cabinet. This woman could not have possibly sent these photos to this department and expected them to ever see the light of day. It was a complete accident that they were even found because of public lack of knowledge. The officers taking the reports don't know a damn thing about Bigfoot. So when people report an orangutan, they don't know anything about Bigfoot either. They just take it for granted it's orangutan, you know? They can't be too keen on biology because there's a huge, tremendous size difference and structural difference in them. So when people are unfamiliar with this kind of data, they get it. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to identify it. These guys just shoved it in a file. You know, there had been 4 or 5 reports of an orangutan, and that was that. And if the reports keep coming, maybe we'll find it and catch it. But, you know, until then, nobody knew what to do with it, so it ended up in a file. And it was a sheer accident that the animal control officer overheard the conversation, went back to the file, pulled out these pictures, and instantly knew this is not an orangutan. And, you know, had the wisdom to make the proper contacts and get it to researchers as opposed to a lot of people would get material like this and immediately throw it up on the internet. It's a bad mistake. It destroys the integrity of the piece, of the artifact. There are a lot of things that researchers and scientists have collected that have never been shown to the public. And we're getting to a point to where researchers and scientists are being more comfortable with displaying some of this stuff to the public. I was extremely proud of John Schuessler's display at the recent MUFON symposium. That's the kind of behavior I love to see, you know, with the theory that if people can see actual artifacts, like what we have back here, then they'll have a better understanding that this is actually studied. We're not people that have nothing better to do with our time and money just sitting around at home thinking up crazy things, you know. This is usually ends up consuming a person. This is how a researcher evolves. Usually somebody has an encounter or an interest in the material, and it builds up from there. Something triggers a psychological response to where you make a transition from just a general interested party to somebody that is really in-depthly into it and will work day and night. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much material you have to read just to become familiar with some of these things and familiar with the fundamentals. And a lot of the material isn't available. It's extremely rare material. And a lot of it's only traded back and forth between researchers. I believe all of that's changing. You know, it was very, very commendable of Schuessler to put up his own pieces from his own collection, actual artifacts, original photographs, many of them extremely famous, and extremely significant and important as well. And there's a lot of insecurity that goes with taking one-of-a-kind materials and putting them out in a crowd full of people you don't even know. It can be hazardous. If something happens to the material, you have nothing but hearsay. And that's something that this business can do a lot less with. You know, there's already too much hearsay, and people either wrongfully reject it or wrongfully accept it. You know, they interact with information for all the wrong reasons. It's like I tell people that ask me, you know, well, how do you get into this kind of research? I tell them, for the most part, you have to start to train yourself how to think and process. Because most of what everybody in this room is thinking is purely by their own experience and what they've been told. And as I mentioned before, to really gain a clear movement towards understanding in any of this kind of study is to put all those presumed experiences aside. Put aside what you already know or what you've been told about it. I've seen a million documentaries, pro and con. Most of them are full of crap. It's amazing to me where all the money goes, you know, and it goes into idiotic entertainment. It goes into programming that is designed to just, you know, keep you mentally numb on your TV as opposed to actually teaching you something. So one of the things that's confronting us right now with these habituation cases, and I think anybody that's engaged in any of these projects feels the same way, to some extent at least, is how the hell do you break this to the world without a drastic repercussion that is going to ultimately be detrimental to their kind? I follow the particular belief that a specific culture, especially if it's existed for thousands of years, shouldn't be interrupted and should be approached with extreme caution. We have years and years of primitive studies, and we've seen thousands of primitive groups, tribes, that have remained the same as old as time. And within a short period of a few years even, just being introduced to white man destroyed their entire culture. Now they're civilized. Now they work jobs and wear jeans and things like this, smoke cigarettes. You know, even those that haven't even progressed that far are detrimented. Usually the first thing that's introduced to them is alcohol and tobacco. Where does that sound familiar? You know, it's a good blindsider for explorers to take advantage of primitives that aren't aware of how we see things and how we structure them, you know, and our rule that the majority rules. Well, most of the world functions off of documents and such, and therefore you have to adhere to documents even though your culture has never, ever been exposed to anything like this whatsoever. The Native Americans here didn't even have writing, you know. They had, you know, cave art and things like this, pictographs, but they had no formal form of writing, no language that they could write down. It's all oral. And the same is true with the Sasquatch. So one of the things we're tackling right now is collecting this oral history while we can. Any number of things can occur that can cancel this communication. Trust is a key portion of it. Another reason why 50 years of research has failed. Just like the Native Americans when, you know, the Europeans first started reaching these shores, the Europeans. We don't even ask. We don't even introduce ourselves. We just go after them with guns. Would you stick around? Would you say hi to anybody? Some of them have. Some of them have a tremendous faith in us, like Fox in Tennessee. And they're willing to do that. They're willing to put not only their safety, but their kind on the line in the name of trust. And that trust took decades of time to develop. Took over 2 generations. It's been going on for over 3 generations. But the trust that was built between Carter and Fox, Robert C. Carter, took an extreme amount of compassion, intelligence, concentration, patience, definitely patience. And that's what brought us to where we are now. And now they are interested in pushing our experience further. They want us to realize some of what they see in their scope of reality. They want to show it to us. But they also know they got to be very, very careful who they're showing this to. Because they know about greed and they know about money. They don't really understand it. You know, they have a low opinion of it. But they do understand some of our motives. And when you go out there and you're looking for Bigfoot and you're packing a big firearm and you got it in your head, Bigfoot, 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 and you're thinking money, if I get photos, if I get a body, if I get cast, I can put that on eBay. They're not going to get anywhere near you because they pick up on this. Whether you accept the telepathic answer or whether you accept that there are vibratory responses that we're unaware of that they pick up on, much like animals do with us. You know how people say a dog can smell fear? Well, they're not really smelling it. You know, they sense it. That's what people mean. They sense it. We sense things, but like Fox says, we're removed. We've trained ourselves to ignore our own responses. Most people are telepathic or psychic to some level. You know, and ongoing studies that have been going on since the 50s have proven this. From Russia all the way to here in the United States. It's profound. The CIA even admits remote viewing. Fully admits this. Public doesn't know about it. It's not something they're going to put on the front page news. But just enough to for them to be able to protect themselves and say, hey, we told the public. Wasn't our fault if we didn't tell it to you in an area where most people would see it. You know? But the fact is that scientifically, we have scientific and governmental acknowledgement of psychic activity. Bottom line. We know it's a reality. Oh, what does that mean? That means that every scientist and researcher that the government has disseminated and abused, and society has abused to some extent, media has grossly abused and misrepresented in the past, were all wrongfully conspired against. There's no other answer. A lot of people believe that, why doesn't the government tell us about UFOs? Come on, man. I mean, who hasn't seen a UFO? One of those reasons is they spent so many years destroying careers, destroying reputations, destroying families and lives, possibly committing homicides, possibly tampering with evidence, possibly definitely engaging in propaganda and misinterpretation and misguidance in the media and in the public view. So if they turn around and they said, okay, we're going to spill the beans, you were right all along, UFOs were here, what kind of people does that make them in the public's eyes? A lot of people would be very upset about that, whether they believed before or not. You know, as I've said, many a great scientist has died for his curiosities. You know, Wilhelm Reich was one of them. Pioneering man. He was arrested by federal officers without charges, without trial, and detained in a prison without any charges against him whatsoever. All of his scientific work was seized, and that's where he died 6 years later, under somewhat suspicious circumstances. Any of you familiar with the case of Morris K. Jessup? He was a pioneering UFO scientist in the early days, and he hopped the bandwagon with Ivan here, Ivan Terrence Sanderson, which I might add, without this man, none of us would be studying any of this. He was one of the very first to sacrifice his career in the name of truth. People should know this. People need to know these things are happening, you know. And one thing led to another. He spent 6 years writing, to this day, the most comprehensive Bigfoot book ever written. Abominable Snowmen, Legend Come to Life. It was published in 1961. But Ivan was a very stubborn man. He didn't like being told what to do, and one thing he couldn't stand is his colleagues and his superiors telling him, "You're not allowed to look into these things." They threatened him, and that motivated him to do it. He wasn't the type of man to be told what to do, and if you got forceful with him or aggressive, he did the opposite of what you were trying to force him to do, you know, which I think is a really good personality trait. But anyway, Sanderson was the last to see Jessup alive before a very bizarre turn of events in which, long story short, Jessup was making advances in UFO studies, and something interfered with him, whether it was psychological, physical, or all of the above, that caused him to believe that every aspect of his life was being controlled, every minute detail, and he was losing his mind over it. He burst into Ivan Sanderson's home during a dinner with a whole group of scientists, and Ivan, along with 2 colleagues, went into Ivan's private study and placed into his vault and locked it Jessup's work. Well, upon Jessup's request. The man was frantic. Many of these scientists knew this man for years, decades. They were very, very close friends. They were more than just colleagues. And he stated that he had no idea what was happening anymore. And then he disappeared for 2 weeks and turned up in Florida with a bullet in his head. And from that point, they put him in a hospital. Removed the bullet. And I've never seen this before in my life. Somehow, this man, with a fresh bullet wound to the head, at point blank range, mind you, disconnected himself from his IVs, got out of his bed in a hospital gown, walked outside, somehow obtained a gun and repeated it, almost as if he had a program. And that program was just being run until it was followed through with. I have never in my life ever heard of anybody getting shot in the head and then getting up and walking outside, much less somebody handing a man standing in a hospital gown a gun. Where did the second gun come from? So there are hazards, there are very bizarre things going on. We can't clearly say that, you know, this is all government. We don't know. There's so much weirdness going on that much of it isn't even classified. Yesterday, one of the speakers had tapped into tricksters. You know, and it seems that we've had these fiends around us for hundreds of years. And when you look at the parallels, they're very similar to what we determine are men in black, which are not government agents if you get into your Keel studies. These, for all intents and purposes, appear to be non-human entities, coming from somewhere, imitating us, but not quite right. You know? They haven't perfected our image, what we drive, how we dress, how we cut our hair. You know, and these were the small clues that led John Keel to these types of conclusions. These aren't people. They're someone else. And guess what? They're also involved in Bigfoot. You know, I've got many reports of Native Americans that have had Bigfoot encounters and reported them and had been visited by these beings for the sole purpose to intimidate them not to tell anybody. And as far as I know, the intimidation has never followed through. They threaten all kinds of things, but when people eventually do talk, nothing happens to them really. At least to my knowledge. Doesn't mean it's not happening, but I've never seen a case of it. So once again, we're stuck with a psychology of a bark bigger than their bite, much like the Sasquatch. They like to give people trouble, and most people are just so intimidated. If somebody comes to your door and says, you know, I'm so-and-so from the FBI, you got to give me that film, most people, that scares the hell out of a person, and they're like, here, man, take it. You know, I don't want to go to prison. So you know, these impersonators, whether they be men in black or actual human impersonating men in black, because we've had that before, a lot of people will just march into a witness's house and demand materials, and that witness won't even ask. They will hand it right over. And a lot of material's been lost in this manner, you know. Getting back to the historical viewpoint, this right here is a crate label from California, and it's from the early to mid-30s. And the company is called California Giant, and as you can see, there's a gigantic, hairy, man-like person with a lean, very big feet, and he's stealing a crate of lettuce from the field. California has a strong Sasquatch population. It also has a strong agricultural population. And anytime you have a lot of agriculture, you're going to have a lot of Bigfoot, because that's free food. And it's food they can take that will never be noticed. That's the important thing. They can take something out of your backyard freezer. Sooner or later, somebody's going to notice that. You could take some corn out of a field, but they're never even going to come to that point, you know. These casts that you see up here are displayed more or less to give the basic public that hasn't studied any of this stuff a clearer understanding. These two here are complete fabrications. They were passed off as real tracks, but people that fake real tracks don't study Bigfoot, so they don't know how to make a real track, or a fake one that looks real enough. It's nearly impossible to fool a seasoned researcher with the Bigfoot footprints. They're too distinctive. These two here, however, are absolutely real. And if you're familiar with the famous Patterson film, this cast right here, he was tracking this Sasquatch, which was approximately around a 17-year-old adolescent male. He was tracking this Sasquatch when he ran across the one that he filmed, the female, which is known as Patty to the community. This one here was cast back in the 60s by Al Hodges in Washington, I believe, and this is the equivalent of like a 9 or a 10-year-old adolescent male. And it's still bigger than my foot. Over on this table here, we have, and any of you people interested in collecting or studying casts like this is not the original cast, but it's pulled from a mold created by the original. It's a first generation cast, right? So that's as close as you're going to get to the actual artifact. But anyone that has an interest in obtaining materials like that, you know, get my email, grab one of the November Whoopie flyers, the World UFO and Paranormal Expo, and contact me at any given point in time. I have several colleagues that make wonderful, wonderful first generations like this from their rare collections. And as you can see here, one of these gentlemen even goes as far as to make these. And he primarily makes animal track casts and Bigfoot track casts for the intention of educational display. And education is important. If we can't educate and discipline the public, then we can't release the information. Because none of us are dedicated to this to see anybody get hurt, person or Sasquatch, either way. We want all of our mistakes from the past. We have a great opportunity to resolve them at this point and evolve beyond them. You know? It's amazing how quick people are to prejudice. And you don't have to be a different race. It could be in the way you dress, what kind of glasses you wear, you know, anything, absolutely anything. We're too critical on the things that we have no business paying attention to, and we're not critical enough on the things that we should be paying attention to. And this poses a big problem. But until we reach a point to where we are more or less emotionally and psychologically ready, we can't learn or evolve in any of these studies, you know. And we can clearly see this through the studies of some of the finest minds in the fields. And some of these guys have been saying this stuff for 40 years. And the rest of us are just now getting to a point to where we're saying, okay, now I understand. Now I see where you were coming from. The case with the Sasquatch communication. They have dialects, you know. People can't accept that because they're dumb animals, right? Dumb animals don't talk in dialects. So it's very difficult for most. But if that's almost, you can call that the first Bigfoot prejudice. They're animals. The second Bigfoot prejudice, worse, they're monsters. I can only call them people. The more you know about them, the more you interact, the more you realize, the more you have to see. They're no different than, you know, anybody that's done any anthropology and gone to a foreign country like Africa or South America, whatever, and integrated with tribes. You know, they're very strange, very different, total different viewpoint, sometimes frightening to encounter. You know, I had met, many years ago, I had met a group of cannibal pygmies from Africa. They all smoked, by the way. But they had all their teeth filed into fangs, and they were just the greatest bunch of guys. There were 6 of them. Wonderful. They understood enough English for us to communicate. But when they smiled, and all those teeth, it was something so sinister and bizarre, so out of my context of social awareness, that one can only be intimidated and frightened. You know, what if this little guy bites me? And so these adjustments are slow moving, to say the least, but we do have control of it, and most of our prejudices are born once again with the pre-program of what we've been told by our parents, by our government, by our society. We like to think we think for ourselves. We clearly do not. Most of us don't. And it's these disciplines that are going to bring us to an understanding, you know, and is going to bring some of this data and a lot of this material out into the public. You know, but speaking in terms of the Tennessee case, as long as there's a bunch of psychotic hillbilly yahoos that think they're going to get $1 million from a Bigfoot body out there that don't view them as people, which they definitely are, we feel very apprehensive about displaying the hard evidence we have. And there is a mountain of hard evidence that has been examined by the finest and confirmed. We have DNA, we have hair, we have everything. The woman has them in her backyard. And they've been there for decades, over 70 years. So coming up with materials to study and analyze is no problem. Now that we've studied and analyzed it, and now that we have a good body of scientific perspectives to join in, who aren't afraid to become connected in exchange for going where no one has gone before. Larry Batson, one of the best researchers I know, is at a stage like that, to where, you know, he had washed his hands of the Bigfoot thing several years ago, and now he's recharged. He's recharged because a lot of us are waking up to these facts. What he experienced back in the 70s and the 80s, he couldn't report. Telepathy, people talking to him, language, UFOs, it gets crazier. It gets crazier, you know? And so he couldn't communicate with the Bigfoot community without biting his tongue anymore. And he kind of dropped out of it. The beauty of it is that this is all changing. Today's generations of citizens and researchers and scientists, a lot of us have learned from studying those old books, most of which are, far as UFOs go, are worthless and outdated. Weren't worth much in the beginning. A lot of those old books, you have to really be critical in examining your materials. A lot of them are just some of the biggest nonsense you've ever encountered. But it's up to you to make that judgment yourself for what you understand, you know? And personal experience has a great deal with how you interpret information you're given and whether or not you interpret it honestly with yourself. I know there's a lot of Christians that would debate and argue the UFO phenomena till the cows come home from a perspective of their angels coming down to save us from ourselves or their demons coming down to usher in Armageddon. You know, and my problem with that is that, you know, if this is the beginning of the end, well, the end's taken quite a long time because this has been going on for far too long. It's been going on since we've been here. So if it's the end, nobody panic. Don't rush home and pack your things and make out your will or anything because, you know, it's coming upon us like a snail. But yeah, in closing, I would like to say that anybody that has a serious, a lot of people, this is entertainment, which is frightening to some of us. People that are serious in learning more about what goes on. I don't know a person that hasn't had some type of experience they can't explain. I would encourage any individual to take that a step further than the normal and begin to communicate with researchers and scientists. Most of them are very welcoming and helpful, you know, and willing and ready to assist and provide you with materials and good guidance, you know. But I would encourage anybody that has more than just a basic interest to really look deeper into it. Start collecting inside information. Start communicating and networking. And you'd be amazed at some of the things you'll find. But the thing that will amaze you the most is the evolution of your intelligence and your belief systems. You know, I don't believe hardly anything that I believed a year ago. I believe mostly nothing of what I believed 15 years ago before I started all this. And I went in looking for a few things, and I found more than I have the capacity to study. And basically, in a nutshell, there's always room for more. And I don't have a single colleague that isn't willing to help a person get to that in-depth, more concentrated intellectual level, you know. But a lot of people aren't really that motivated. Those are the people that would just as soon sit there and depend on what they're being told, you know. And you should never believe what you're being told. You should believe that in conjunction with your own knowledge, not simply because so-and-so said it. Whether it's me or, you know, Einstein himself, it doesn't matter. The point is that we exist to explore, and I thoroughly believe that. And a lot of people are opening to it, and that can be progressed very easily, very easily. And if you come to the World UFO and Paranormal Expo, we'll be having workshops on how to conduct research. How do you find old 1930s artifacts that have these details and such, and a whole lot more in all these different fields of paranormal activity. So it could be the first step in actual training, in actual development, and actual research, scientific involvement, you know. And another aspect of that is MUFON is a tremendous resource, and if you become a MUFON member, they will train you. They will train you how to investigate, how to study, how to conduct research, how to do it safely and intelligently, you know. And the public just isn't aware of these types of resources, you know. All you have to do is ask. All you have to do is get involved. All of you are obviously, to some extent, already involved. You're taking one step, you know. We need evolution to progress quicker. So anybody that's willing to take more than one step, you know, talk to us. Communicate with everybody that speaks to you. You know, explore this entire realm of study for yourself. And you can make up your own minds. Most people are intelligent and they can figure things out for themselves, you know. And in the wide body of data, hoaxes are very easy to identify and explain. They're very easy to see because the people that commit them don't study them, so they don't do them accurately, you know. And I think that's about it. I'll leave. Is somebody speaking right after me? Yes. All right. Do I need to pull all this out? All right. Well, I'll leave this here for right now, but later on.
Questions? Yeah.
I'm sure we have questions.
We can do that. We can do that later. Yeah. Yeah. All this is going to stay up here for now, but later, as another speaker comes in here, I'll move it around over to somewhere else, and you'll have an opportunity to take a look at it.